Okay, give me just a second here. And skadoosh. And good evening. And yes, this is old school RPG. Now, what I'd like to talk about is that. Hello, Carlton. Okay. The last few episodes, we've talked about different genres. We talked about the dead genres, the great cross-genre war, and even the superhero genre. Tonight, we're going to discuss different ways to categorize systems besides what genre they're in. Alright? Now, one of the easiest ways to categorize a system: simple or complex. Now, just to give you an example, one of the simplest systems, in fact, probably the simplest system ever written, was called Twerps, the world's easiest role-playing system. Yeah, really. And it was exactly what it sounds like. It was the world's easiest role-playing game system to learn and get used to. Case in point, there was one stat. That was your skill rank, your level, everything. The way it worked, you created a character concept. You ran it by the game master, and he either said yay or nay. And when you asked to do something, he decided if you doing it was fit your character concept. If it did, you got to add your level. If it didn't, you didn't. Straight up, that's all it was. So if you're level 4, and you're a pirate, and you want to sail a ship and navigate, well, that's in your character concept. You get to add your 4 to D6. You want to navigate in the Sahara. Game Master says, no, I don't think you can do that. Straight D6 roll. That's Twerps. That's for all intents and purposes, that's how that game works. It's the simplest, literally the simplest game ever. At the opposite end of the spectrum, and trying to keep it kind of old school, 80s era, we're going to go with Rollmaster. Rollmaster was very, very complex. Every weapon, every attack spell, all of them had a different chart. Different effects on different kinds of armor. And then you had different critical effects based on what kind of attack it was. Or even more than that, let's say you hit somebody with a bastard sword. You do X amount of damage. They take this level of edged critical and this level of crush critical. If you hit on that type of armor, that is. And of course, some of them were kind of obvious, like, edged criticals are what happens when you get cut. It could be as little as you nick the back of their hand and they have to make a roll to see if they hold on to whatever's in the hand. To as, well, crush critical, well, that's impact. And again, it could be as little as you pop their wrist and shook it a bit, and they gotta make sure they don't let go of what's in their hand. To, you hit them here, the mace or whatever stops down here, and you've got a massive pull. It's extraordinarily complex. And again, like I said, some of those categories like edged and crush, pretty obvious, but plasma criticals, they kind of melt, disintegrate the matter, and just melt the target. In short, if you didn't have a game master that knew the game, knew exactly where to find every single chart you're not a game master. Knew where to find every single chart and critical table and everything. It could take a very long time for 4 adventurers against 5 goblins. It could take a while. Okay, you gotta flip to that chart against that type of armor, and you've got this type of critical and that type of critical, so you gotta roll percentage twice. Oh, did you roll a 96 or above? You roll again and add. Yeah, that's about how it went. So you got simple, complex. Most games, of course, will be in the middle. Sometimes the complexity doesn't stem from the actual complexity of the system, but rather from the difficulty of switching gears from a totally different kind of system to this. Going back from 5th edition to 2nd edition. 2nd edition seems quite complex, even though technically it was a little simpler. It's just a lot of 5th ed and 3rd ed rules were homogenized. Stats for the different, or the bonuses for the different stats, for example, were homogenized. In 1st and 2nd, they were totally different depending on what stat they were. Anyway, simple to complex. The next one is a bit more subjective, with a few exceptions. And that's, I would dare say, it's not a range, but almost a triangle. And that is simulation, cinematic, literary. Now, I don't mean, by literary, I don't mean Lord of the Rings. I don't mean, Terry Goodkind or George R.R. Martin. I mean way back. Like The Horn of Roland. Take two 20th level fighters in 5th edition. Give them ordinary plate armor, a mundane shield, and a mundane longsword. Take away anything that's supernatural. No class ability, just straight up hitting and attacking. And how long will it take that D8 plus 5 to wear down their opponent? A long time. Well, if we go into Horn of Roland, which is the story of the Paladins of Charlemagne, we see there is an encounter between Roland and a giant named Farragut. Farragut was actually a commander of the Saracen army and was descended from Goliath. Well, and is formed for the day. Their fight took days. And it described how each blow would bash armor off, and they just wail away on each other for hours, and then take a break at night and discuss philosophy and religion, and compare Christianity with Islam. Yeah. And then get up in the morning and start bashing each other again. That's the kind of thing that you see with D&D. It's not really cinematic, and it's not really simulationist. It's more of a literary. However, when you go to cinematic, that's actually something that the earliest cinematic games weren't simulating movies. They were simulating comic books. Marvel heroes, DC heroes, very quick, very in flow with their genre. It's very cinematic. You can do things that are larger than life on a scale that even now the movies are barely coming close to. And more recently, you had a game like 7th Sea. 7th Sea was set in the fantasy equivalent of Europe. It wasn't actually Europe, but it was equivalent. And it had a little mechanic whereby mooks, your basic grunt squad, the brute squad, whatever, if you hit them once and deal damage, any damage at all, they go down. If they soak the hit, they don't go down. But if they take any damage, they go down. And you don't have to worry about them for the rest of the fight. A lieutenant had half as much damage that it could take as an equivalent character. And a true villain had the same amount. So a hero and villain going with equal stats going toe to toe, you never knew who was going to win, which is what was usually a party going, Gah! But in general, it's like you see the heroes getting swarmed by dozens of thugs, and they're just taking them down in sweeping blows, knocking right and left, because that's how it goes in those shows. And then they see, I'm the boss's number one man. And they fight for a little bit, but it's pretty clear that the number one man is going to go down. And then finally the fight with the boss himself, and it's epic, and it go back and forth, swinging from chandeliers, the whole 9 yards. The epic duels that you'll see between Basil Rathbone and Errol Flynn, that sort of thing. Simulationist is attempting to be realistic, which for a role-playing game usually is what people are trying to avoid. They don't want to be realistic. They want to be entertained. However, in a horror game, it's usually pretty realistic for if you get shot with a 9mm pistol, even if you don't die, even if you stay conscious, you're not going to be happy. So paradoxically, it actually works well with the more horror style genres, where most horror movies about ordinary people stuck in supernatural situations. Because if you stick, Batman in a supernatural situation, you're not going to be focused on the horror of the things that should not be. No, you're going to wonder, okay, how's Batman going to solve this one? So that's another aspect that you can measure. Another option is, how to put this? Scalability. A fight between a normal, ordinary, beginning peasant farmer and his identical twin, in theory, should be roughly equal to a fight between those same individuals, and no, furball, get down. Those same individuals after 6 years of studying at Shaolin Temple. It might take longer because they actually know how to parry and strike and all that, but the end result would be very similar. And to take it to an even greater extreme, you have, let's say, Jor-El and Zod duking it out toe-to-toe on Krypton. Okay, that's how that fight goes. You then take them to Earth, where now they are able to lift 1,000,000 tons and fly at Mach 30 and whatever power level they're at for that particular aspect of the DC universe. Does it handle the same way at that power scale as it did at this one? Now, most game systems have an optimal power range. And with games like D&D, you'll get arguments as to where that is. For some people who tend to prefer a slightly more realistic, grittier game, that tends to be lower levels. For players who like to play ultra high fantasy on the scale of Conan and King Kull, with sorcerers that can just rearrange battlefields with a gesture, then that'd be closer like 18th to 20th. And still others will tell you that it's at about 10th level. However, it's not as... It's a pretty wide range. It's more on taste. However, with a game system like DC Heroes, DC Heroes seems to hit its sweet spot for fluff versus gameplay. Right around the tier where your primary attack is doing between 10 and 18 APs of effect value, which those are game terms. Basically, that means that it's equal to having a strength of between 10 and 18, or an energy blast of between 10 and 18. Because you go too much higher, and you're only going up one column for every +5. But every +5 is 32 times stronger. And strength starts to lose meaning. This becomes abstract. So, at the lower levels, you've got the problem of graininess. A human being, average human, has a 2 strength. Peak human has a 4, which is one column. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One column difference between average ordinary human and Hafthor Bjornsson. Yeah. So, you have some games that have a pretty wide range of this scalability, a sweet spot. Some games have kind of a narrow range. Some play shift better, lower power level. GURPS, Palladium tends to be slightly better on the lower power level. Others better on the higher power level. Champions, DC Heroes, and so on. Now, the thing is, there's any number of other ways we could sort game systems. My usual method is I sort by genre, I sort by simplicity, complex, simple, and I sort by cinematic, simulation, literature. So that's how I usually do it. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and call this a night. I've been pretty risky. I've been having problems with connection issues lately. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna give you all a little bit of advice before I head out, and then I'm gonna pull up my title card, and when I can see it on the broadcast. So, thank you very much. And the most important thing about any game system is, does it help you tell the story you want, and is it a system that your players enjoy using? It could be the most realistic simulation on the planet for your ultra-realistic game, but if the players don't like it, it's not going to do your job for you. It could be the most dynamic cinematic game, but if the players find it unrealistic and then it's not going to be the right system for you. Just use what fits your party and yourself. So, have a good night.